up the floor for questions for the three talks by Adham, Shada, Lama, and Jud. Anyone? Well, I have a few on my own يعني. First of all, I would maybe end with saying it was really amazing, Jud and Lama, how you provided this beautiful opportunity space between catastrophe and liberation. We're often oscillating between one or another, but this in-between state is really rarely discussed. So my question, we do? Oh, Fadi, go ahead, تفضل.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get you to see me for some reason. Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Thank you for this. I have a quick reflection that it's not a question, but maybe you can reflect on it. I think all three presentations يعني بعتقد كانوا يعني straight at the heart of the what I was presenting this morning about how do we teach architecture. So apart from these being excellent presentations as research, but the problem is whenever I work with somebody on these kind of things, they're always presented as this is not architecture. So again, it's not a question, but if you can throughout answering the questions, reflect on how do you deal again with this? How do you see yourself taking that kind of work as a fugitive practice يعني into teaching spaces, whether it's at the university, whether it's at somewhere else? Because this is what's interesting. You're talking about architecture, like in the case of prisoners, they are creating their architecture. Architecture is not the building itself, it's the space they create, whether they, even if it was, as one prisoner said, for a few days, etc. So this idea of architecture and what it means, versus the more hegemonic one that we teach in school, where we have to build walls, while what you're talking about is an architecture where you have to bring down walls. It's the complete opposite of the architecture that we know. And thank you again. Excellent presentations. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Fadi. Would you like to comment? I had a similar note or question for Shahd when I was looking at the presentation, just to add to that. Because as architects, we look at these drawings and spaces and we can recognize our own everyday spaces in those. So the question then becomes, how do we learn? How do we not repeat the same carceral architecture through our everyday, through our cities and spaces? Yeah, go ahead. Would anyone like to comment on Shadi's reflection?
I mean, I could help out here, maybe.
Sure.
Although my work was not strictly on incarceration or regarding imprisonment in particular. However, when we speak about, for instance, how do we make spaces, specifically in Palestine, or it is rather challenging because in the end, I mean, you could look at it from two different scales, of course. The scale in which that operates operates kind of an institutional level is a kind of an impossibility. However, there is always this room that already exists in the camp. That's why I presented the camp in particular, because the laws do not apply there. Therefore, the imaginary laws do not apply there. The ability to kind of to go off script spatially is also present there. So I do believe that in order, I mean, this is clearly directed to Shahad and Jud and Lama. However, I do believe from an architectural perspective, if we are to do a call for action in this regard, it would be to do more of care architecture, or rather decentralized modes of architecture that does not rely on institutional support, institutional kind of, and that's actually already is being done here in Palestine in many on different scales and different facets. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you, Adham.
Yeah.
Jude?
And I just have a quick thought because you mentioned the university. Somehow this brings to mind because I live between Amman and Berlin, and in Berlin I was studying at this art university called the UDK. And the past 2 years during the genocide, this new organizational structure emerged called the Student Coalition Berlin. And it brought together collectives from various universities in the city. And these would become the structures through which student occupations, encampments, etc., are organized. And one of the workshops that I recall attending, and I think the context in which it took place matters. Also, it matters to me because I come from the space of cultural work. So it was a workshop on constructing makeshift barricades in case the police are invited to storm the building and arrest the students. And this workshop took place in this cultural institution that was shut down by the German government through the withdrawal of its funds after having published a statement in solidarity with the Palestinians post 7th of October. And what happens to this cultural space, because again we're talking about the production of space, is that in this period in between the withdrawal of its funds and its subjection to yani, quote unquote death because it will cease to exist, and between its actual closure, I think the kind of space making or the production of space and sociality, the new forms of sociality that emerged, is something to learn from for years to come. But yeah, I bring this up to say that I think the forms of architecture that we're referencing take place particularly in conditions of, to quote Basil al-Araj, exiting the law. So I think there's like a relationship between the university as an institution and the law that perhaps forecloses such an inquiry or such a practice, such a political practice. But as we've seen also from the past 2 years, and as we also said in this presentation, these structures never foreclose politics completely. And the space and the cracks for producing transgressive kind of politics are always there.
Thank you, Jude. We have a question? Yeah.
I have a question to Adham. Maybe when you were showing the video at the end of like the remorphing of the map and removing the places we do not have visual information on, I was curious to know, is there like kind of a market right now for people to be able to access visual mapping of the regions? So I know, for example, in the south of Lebanon now, if you check on Google Map, all of the images are like 2 years ago or a year ago, and it's like we're always trying to find ways, like as if there is a monopoly also on who gets to film whom and who gets to see their own images. So can you speak a bit more on that and on ways of resistance against it? And also how people are dealing with it. Is there some private spaces that people try to buy access to the maps, or you know. Thank you very much. Beautiful work. Thank you all.
تفضل أدهم.
Yeah, I thought I was speaking. Thank you for the question. There is this initiative by Visualizing Palestine by by I think Adam Berkeley, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's
Ahmed Barkley, yeah.
Ahmed Berkeley. Yeah, right. Sorry. And they have the kind of their approach, as I said, like counter mapping is essentially is the idea of having any form of agency on representing a certain narrative, especially the oppressed narrative. So therefore, there's this website called Palestinian or Palestine Open Maps, and I mean there is that it kind of gives you a run through, or it gives you also sort of um, uh, it kind of gives you access also. So this access in itself becomes a counter map in this regard. Also, there are certain initiatives. I don't know if they do exist on a structural website. There have been many kind of trials to do that. There are some in the works and have been through discussions, but never came to fruition. However, I mean, it's rather. I think I would see it as a kind of not the right approach to kind of rely on Google or these big tech corporations to provide you with data, because the alignment is with the entity um, based on capital
It's a paid
generally.
service.
Therefore, yeah, so therefore I would say there is OpenStreetMaps, for instance, which is still open source and people can add to it and can access information freely. So the parcels, the buildings, and all the plots are available, and it is used by of course by activists um, to upload data up to date there.
Sure.
Thank you for explaining. Can you just walk me though through this? Like, who owns this visual data? Like, can we all access images from the satellite, and then Google has a monopoly over it? Is it an international? Are there agreements on what data is being put? Because I know also some region remove certain sensitive data, and I'm really coming from like no idea about it here.
So in general terms, who who owns the data, especially like in terms of Google, for instance, Google owns its own data because it has its own satellites, and of course, all these um, data corporations generally align themselves with capital and the state. So therefore, there are certain, of course, we can speak, of course, about the Google Street View, for instance, in Google. If you go to Germany, you might not find data there in certain areas, or most areas, because of privacy laws. I don't know if that has changed. I don't know, Jude. Haven't. But for instance, there are certain areas that, for instance, do not allow Google, or just send kind of like a letter to Google, please remove this area from the map, for instance. So that kind of does that. However, I do not have a clear, like for instance, the data set that I use, I produce myself. And of course it is available. And if you want access to data that I have, I can share with you a link and you can access all the photos, the videos, the recordings, and of course the GIS data. But as far as I can tell, I mean, no, I don't know if there is any kind of, apart from OpenStreetMaps, that kind of all encompassing. I don't know if
Thank you.
that answered the question.
Thank you, Adham. Maybe I can add, for example, Palestine Open Maps is actually a project by Al-Shahabi Majd, and I think he's doing that as part of his PhD. So
Oh, yeah.
sometimes it is connected to academic institutions, but mapping in general is very much a state sponsored activity. There's a very interesting paper that was written on the use of these tools, and basically it extends into OpenStreetMaps as much as it's crowdsourced and local. And it explains the basically barriers of accessibility to these tools, looking at the case of Grassroot al-Quds, which had a counter mapping initiative also. You might want to look at that. Type, thank you. We have a final question by Teresa. Teresa, go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you so much for all your talks. It was great. I had a question specifically for Adam. Right at the beginning, you were mentioning how maps were kept secret to facilitate colonial appropriation by the Portuguese and the Spanish and the Dutch, etc. And that made me wonder, in terms of the specific context of the Israeli government's efforts to aggressively occupy the West Bank, often with the involvement of armed settlers, how do you see the politics of cartography operating now? So is it, a mix of volunteer-led, very decentralized actions where settlers move first and then sort of the post moves along with them? Or do you have information about the government providing specific cartographic orders in terms of guidance, in terms of, which spaces need to be occupied? Or I guess maybe a mix of both, since they're not mutually exclusive. But I was wondering if you had information about that, and also how would you see then that sort of cartography-led state expansion in this specific context? Thank you so much.
Thank you. So what I would, in terms of cartographic data in general, now we have generally we have information, we have access to information. Everyone's kind of like information is sort of to a degree it's democratized, right? Like we can access that. However, that becomes a challenge because literally what can be accessed visually or via your phone or via your devices or like as data, uh, for Palestinians cannot be accessed physically. So therefore, if we speak about settlers being like a self-led initiatives, that's kind of misleading because there's a coordinated action, and there are, of course, they call it semi-governmental agencies in which lead that effort, coordinated action. And of course, it is further, it's called multiplied by state-sponsored declarations in general that support this kind of expansionist, let's say, policy. However, also on the other hand, we have Palestinians who have that land. This is their land. Like I know, for instance, my relatives who lost hundreds of acres of land in the past 2 years during the genocide, 3 years. Um, uh, they lost that, and only just by one settler who just puts a kind of like a caravan on the land, and then moves to another land and puts another caravan. And these caravans and this movement is always sponsored by the state. Uh, in terms of capital, in terms of protection. Protection is very important. Like these people, if they did not have protection, they would not have these incursions and kind of expropriation of the land. So therefore, what was the second part of the question? Sorry.
I guess my point, so that part I'm aware of, both the protection and the fact that there's basically a general sort of incentive to go. I guess it's more about the politics of cartography, whether there are, whether this expansion that for us that just sees it in the news feels sort of random, whether there is actually a cartographic order that is that I'm missing in a way.
Yeah, definitely. It is definitely coordinated, as I said before, because in general these expansionist agenda are the kind of almost confiscated all sea area. So you don't see like you see is Israel going to annex the West Bank? It is actually a case of annexation. Last month there was this new law. I don't know if you've seen it. There was this new law that Israelis actually can buy property within Area A. So essentially in the city center of Ramallah, which is unheard of. It's a law that has been set by the Jordanian government back when they were in charge of the West Bank. So therefore, I do believe that came. So as you say, like it's a kind of a progression. I do believe that it came. This part came after they almost kind of agreed that they already took all Area C and some parts of Area B in the according to the Oslo kind of designation. So therefore, yes, I do believe that there is this strategy. And as you saw, of course, in the presentation, there is also these strategies are embedded within institutions within the kind of the civil administration and the army that actually study urban theories, philosophy, social theory in order for them to coordinate the action in general. So it's hierarchical, it's systematic, it's institutional. So yes, it does exist, and there are many resources on that. Yeah.
Thank you, Adham.